Hey all, David Webb of The Great Taking put me on to a good friend of his, Ken Ivory, who's a politician in Utah. And very interesting story he relates to me. He's bringing in bills to get the state of Utah to invest a portion of their kind of general wealth, if you will, for the state into physical gold, real money. So really important stuff going on in America. Other states are copying his legislation. I think 8 or 10 now are looking into it, simply copying what he created because people are wising up to the cruciality of physical gold, whether at a state level or like me personally, and most of my top financial people are heavily hedged into physical gold. So there's a link below if you're interested in following up. The experts at Pure Gold UK, who I work with, are just unbelievably well informed, not just in physical metals, but in the whole financial turmoils that may be coming. So if you wish, you can follow up with them for some good advice. But anyway, here, let's get to Ken. Hey guys, David Webb of The Great Taking fame, I'm sure most of you know him, connected me to Ken Ivory, who's a state representative in Utah, and he's doing some amazing work on gold and also on generally getting the state's role back in its proper place of kind of governance versus the federal. So great to see you, Ken.
You as well, Ivor. Pleasure to be on with you.
No, it's super. And I know your time is tight. You're very busy with what you're going to talk about. But maybe we could quickly go through first the legislation around gold ownership or its place in the monetary system.
Yeah, no, happy to talk about that. Goes back a while. Last year, I passed a bill. It was House Bill 348 in Utah. And for the first time, we have a state able to invest in gold. And so the bill that we passed with our state treasurer, Marlo Oaks, that many people know, that it allows our state to invest up to 10% of our rainy day funds in precious metals, in gold. And for the first time, there's a state actually investing and hedging and diversifying our investment in gold. And so that bill passed, went into effect, and our state is now, I think we're up to something like 100 million, maybe a little bit north of 100 million. And we're authorized to invest up to 140 million. That's 10% of the rainy day fund. And so we started doing that. There were a lot of naysayers that said, "Oh, this is too volatile. This is too risky." And we said, "Well, no, this is the most risk-free asset in the world." And of course, now we're up, 50% year over year, basically, and that's turned out to work pretty well. And so then this year, we wanted to extend that, and so House Bill 306 was to allow us to begin transacting in gold and silver. And of course, you may know in our Constitution, Article 1, Section 10 actually dictates that as states, we have to uh, establish gold and silver. It says no state shall make anything but gold and silver legal tender in payment of debt. And so the bill would allow vendors and service providers to the states to choose payment in gold and silver electronically transmitted, so we can fractionally begin that fractional transaction in gold. Or of course they could choose dollars and let the value of their dollars devalue 10% per year, and but their choice. And so the bill passed unanimously in the House, every Republican and a number of Democrats in the Senate. And we thought we were home free. And on the last day, 10 minutes before the bell struck, I got a call from the governor's attorney, and he vetoed the darn bill. And so now we're working on a veto override and special session, and we'll get it done. It just takes a lot more time and a lot more effort. And, but that's the way the process works. We work one way, and then you hit a dead end, and we got to come back at it another way. And so we're still moving forward, and that's where we're heading.
Yeah, I can understand, and very frustrating as well. It's funny, but the Bank of International Settlements, the head of the central banks, 2019, they raised physical gold up to tier one from, I think, 2B. So it became the only other kind of tier one asset, liquid asset, alongside the sovereign debt of the US, the dollar. And then the central banks have been amassing gold at a frightening pace for the last 5 or 6 years. So it's funny that there was resistance originally to you. But the really interesting thing is, What reasons were given by the General to try and veto? Did they have to give a logic to that?
Yeah, it was the attorney for the governor rather than the attorney general, two different things. But initially, you'll appreciate this. Initially, the bill that we did last year, they just had no concept. Where would we ever buy that much gold, and where would we put it? Do we hide it in the basement at the Capitol, and how would we ever liquidate so much gold? Do we have to take our little red wagon and have gold bars and a cardboard sign and and sell gold? I'm like, and so seriously, we had to start at that most basic level, the Basel III that you mentioned. No, this is the only tier one asset besides cash, and actually safer than cash because there's no counterparty risk to a Federal Reserve note. And we're one of four locations in the nation that already has a Brinks vault. It's 10 miles away from the Capitol where I'm sitting. It's already there. And so fortunate to have that. No, we vault it right there. And once you've got it vaulted and you've got it verified in the vault, you liquidate it with a phone call. It's easier to liquidate $100 million of gold as it would be to liquidate $100 million of ETFs or stocks or anything else of that nature. And that education process, I mean, we really had to start slow because most people, a lot of people in the United States, they just don't have exposure to gold as an investment class.
Yeah, and that's an historical thing. I mean, it's fascinating. I know people who are very senior in Ireland in banking and public service relating to financial. And a couple of years ago, I said I was moving a large portion of pension into physical gold. And literally, they just had a complete lack of understanding, even though they're very high level people in treasury management, etc. They've been educated for many decades in the West, it appears, that gold is a barbarous relic, that it's silly. And yet, over in Asia and over in the East, the Chinese and everything, there's huge gold ownership. But the West, somehow, it's almost like it was intentional to have people get away from gold and get into the whole paper money and equities and securities. Almost intentional.
Yeah, I have my speculation, right? But you go back to 1971, and the United States had the Great Society that we were putting our hand in the cookie jar, so to speak, printing money, and the Vietnam War that we're printing money, and the European countries, particularly France, said, no, we want the gold. We don't want these dollars that you're exporting and printing and sending out. We want the gold. And they send a battleship loaded with pallets full of dollars to New York Harbor. And Nixon says, time out. We're going to temporarily close the gold window, right? Temporarily, August 15th of 1971, close the gold window. But until that time, 1863 to 1971, we were a gold standard. And so to think that it's something rare or unusual that we would have a choice in money is really unfathomable. But they closed the gold window and said, we promise we're not going to print money like that again, but just trust us. We'll have a purely fiat currency. And, from 1971 until now. In fact, anecdotally, 1971, you could buy the average house in Salt Lake City for $20,000 or 563 ounces of gold, right? Today, that same house is nearly $600,000. The $20,000 doesn't get you anywhere close to a down payment, but the 563 ounces of gold, well, that'll buy you close to four houses today. So that's what's happened to that promise when they went off the gold standard and said we promise we're not going to print money and it'll be good as gold. And no one's ever kept that promise throughout history. No one. And we're at a point now that our dollars are devaluing at 7 to 10% per year, and without a fixed standard like Article 1, Section 10 requires, we're going to see more of that when we're overspending $2 to $3 trillion a year. We have to roll 1/3 of $37 trillion this year. So we've got a $3 trillion deficit, 2 to 3, right? And we're rolling somewhere on the order of 1/3 of 37 trillion. I'm sure Ireland's gonna buy those bonds, right?
Or Maybe the Chinese will if the tariffs issue gets sorted.
Yeah, well, like you said, the Chinese announced and they stopped buying bonds in 2014 and they made the announcement and they quit buying bonds. They went from 1.4 trillion down to I think it's about 700 billion now. And they're putting all their store of value into gold and they've got all the BRICS plus all storing value into gold instead of dollars. This is a serious issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, the Chinese, of course, I've interviewed Simon Hunt yesterday. I'm not sure you know him, but he's an exceptional economist and macroeconomics guy in Dubai. And he was saying, yeah, around 25,000 tons of gold is the estimate that China have, but probably a lot more. So they're moving away from paper, like you say, and they're getting heavy into physical and pretty smart thing to do. So what is the timing, do you think, with the not attorney general, but the attorney to the governor? The timing to get or circumvent that is a matter of 6, 12 months or a little longer?
Yeah, in fact, I've got the governor's statements right here as to why they vetoed the bill. The concerns with the legislation. Number four, reading verbatim, requires a non-existent department to execute. The bill incorrectly calls the Division of Finance the Department of Finance. We in legislation, we have the ability to correct Scrivener errors automatically. But this is the kind of reach to put a veto on the bill. So the timing, we have until May 6th to hold a veto override session. And so right now we're negotiating with our partners in the Senate. They have a couple of bills that they would like to see on an override. Obviously, we would like to see this it passed unanimously in the House and passed nearly unanimously in the Senate. And so we have until May 6th to hold an override session. If that doesn't come about, then there's talk that we may have a special session at our interim legislative session in May, which would be the third Wednesday in May. And so we're going to get this done one way or the other. Arkansas, just yesterday, Governor Huckabee Sanders, she signed a carbon copy of our bill yesterday in Arkansas. So we passed the bill a couple of months ago, but they're the first to get to the finish line. So they're doing almost identically the same thing. And one of our governor's concerns was he didn't want to be first, even though in Utah, our number one export, Ivor, is gold. By 7 times number two, our number one import is also gold by more than double number two, because we've got the mines, we've got the Kennecott, the Rio Tinto mines, we've got the refineries. And so it's our number one export, our number one import. We pride ourselves on being a fintech leader. Why would we not want to be first? But now we don't have to worry about that. Arkansas is first, so now we can come along and follow their lead, even though they copied my bill. But it's great. Let's have everyone into the party. Let's get free people. Let's get sound money to free people and move forward. So we're looking forward to having everyone involved, and there's more yet that we're planning. We had a couple of other bills in the works this year that we'll follow up on next year.
Excellent. Well, the very best of luck with that. Getting back to real money. Everyone should be doing it, governmentally, privately, all over the world. Just steadily get back to something real rather than this hyper printed paper stuff. But I want to be respectful of your time, but we did say we might touch on another topic, an even bigger, broader topic in many ways, bringing kind of power back to the state level and somewhat counteracting the creeping federal power that's caused a lot of issues we don't need to get into, but a lot of listeners will be aware of that.
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. In the United States, we had a very unique governing system as it was started out, that all governing power starts with the people. And then the people delegated a small fraction of their governing power to government. And of that small fraction of governing power to government, a tiny speck, was delegated to the federal government. And so the state and the national government are to work as a governing partnership. Few and defined to the national government, Madison says. numerous and indefinite powers to the states. In fact, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, said, "We look to the states to defend their prerogatives by not yielding to federal coercion." And then he says, "States are separate, independent sovereigns. Sometimes they have to act like it." Little analogy, right? You've probably ridden a bicycle before, right? So imagine you've got a bicycle that has a bloated front tire and it's got a flat back tire. So the answer to that problem is just to ride the bike harder, right? Maybe it's to get Lance Armstrong all hopped up on steroids to ride the bike. That would fix the problem, right? Or maybe you get someone to yank the handlebars harder to the left or harder to the right. And a fifth grader could tell you, no, you have to fix the balance in the tires. And our system was designed, two spheres of government, and one had few and defined powers, and the other one numerous and indefinite powers. And now the federal government is so bloated it's about to explode, 37 trillion in debt, and taking over basically all the cares of daily life. And the states have ceded and allowed that power to be taken to where it's nearly flat. And all we talk about every 4 years is, should Trump or Harris ride the bike? Should they yank the handlebars harder to the left or harder to the right? And so this initiative that we started this year with House Bill 488 is to balance the tires, structure, not politics, to restore balance in that governing partnership. And so that's an initiative you're going to hear a lot more about as we just restore that structure. Well, then that allows for that rich diversity at the state level, and we don't have to fight over everything that concerns life, liberty, property, livelihood every 4 years over who has the executive order pen. So yeah, we passed that unanimously this year. You'll see a lot of that moving forward. I've got a little book here that's available on Amazon. It's called "Where's the Line? How States Protect the Constitution." And there's actually a website where we teach people how people govern, how we act as the boss of our government. It's called igovern.us, like iPhone, iPad, igovern.us. So yeah, if you get a minute, check it out. I'd love your thoughts. And anyone, there's a free video course on there. I'd love any feedback that you or your listeners might have.
Super stuff, Ken. Well, that sounds like excellent progress. So igovern.us, I'll put it on the screen when I release this. And yeah, to everyone listening, especially American people, any way you can connect with Ken and his team and support this. I guess America needs this all over in multiple states and to grow it. And to be quite honest, Ken, it's kind of poignant, but it reminds me of, we have a dreadful situation in Europe where we have all these sovereign countries, supposedly sovereign, but the EU Commission now is an unelected body that is ruling roughshod over all the countries and dictating all of the terms. And the European Parliament is a talk shop with no powers. It doesn't really make laws. So it's an exact kind of facsimile of the Soviet system with the Politburo and the Soviet Parliament, which didn't really have any teeth. So yeah, we're suffering over here, but I won't whine about our problem. Sounds like America is getting on the road. So any last thoughts, or will we wrap it
Well,
at that?
we appreciate that. Those concerns are happening all over the world. And, as we teach these classes and help people understand, and we work with other leaders, not to diminish what happens anywhere else in the world, but we feel like we have a responsibility to preserve that light of liberty, that light of self-governance. And government does not work unless we're engaged. We own the government, but if we're just along for the ride, government by its very nature is going to grow. And so we're going to lose sound money. We're going to have the value of our money eroded right out from under us. We'll have government bloating and growing if we're not on the job acting like the boss. I mean, anyone that's had a company, a club, an organization, if you're only there part of the time, you don't know the people you hire, you don't give them the job description, you don't follow up, 10 out of 10, that fails. So what we're doing at igovern.us, this national federalism initiative, getting people back engaged, that we take ownership of our government again, and we get free people, we get sound money to free people again, so that we can preserve the purchasing power of our earnings and savings. So Ivor, thanks for what you're doing to get the message out. It's absolutely critical, and we'll look forward to continuing the discussion.
No, thank you so much, Ken. You're doing all the work. And sometimes I quote, I think it's Plato, the price men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. So
Yep,
I
true
think
statement.
you guys are safeguarding against that and getting things back on track. Thanks so much, Ken.
Thanks, Ivor.
That'll do it, folks. Great work there from Ken. I'm sure you'll agree. And as mentioned, a link below to Pure Gold in the UK. Best guys in the business, and they have huge expertise, huge team, and you can get a free consultation there if you wish with the link I have down below, and also a period of free storage to boot, though many people do prefer to keep the physical gold themselves, which is understandable in these challenging times. But of course, be very careful with security, goes without saying. So till next time,